Do you believe that suffering breaks men? Most people do. We are told that pain is something to escape, to numb, to avoid at all costs. But Nietzsche would say the opposite. For him, suffering, when faced with clarity and courage, is not an enemy. It is a forge. It is fire. It is the hidden fuel that turns weakness into strength. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. You have heard the line before. It is repeated so often that it sounds like a cliché. But for Nietzsche, it was not a slogan. It was a map. He believed that if you know how to walk the path, suffering will teach you how to stand taller. If you refuse, if you run, the same suffering will crush you. Think about it. Every scar, every loss, every dark night is a test. Some men let it destroy them. Others choose to embrace it. And those who embrace it discover a terrifying power, a power that makes them unbreakable. This is the story of that power, and it begins with Nietzsche. Friedrich Nietzsche was born in 1844 in a small town in Germany. His life was marked from the beginning by fragility. He struggled with poor health, with constant migraines, with a body that often betrayed him. He lived much of his life in solitude, wandering through mountains and small villages, always writing, always pushing his ideas to the very edge. By the end of his life, he collapsed into madness. And yet, out of this broken life came ideas that still shake the foundations of Western thought. Nietzsche is not a comforting figure. He does not soothe. He does not promise peace. He challenges. He confronts you with the sharpest possible question. What will you do with your suffering? Will you let it make you small, or will you let it turn you into something greater? This is the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy. He saw suffering not as an injustice, not as an accident, but as raw material. Pain is a kind of ore buried deep in the ground. It is heavy, it is dark, it is difficult to carry, but for those who know how to work it, that same ore becomes iron, and from iron you can forge a sword. He gave this process a name: the will to power. Not power over other people, but power over yourself. The drive to grow, to expand, to become more than what you were yesterday. Every challenge, every loss, every wound can either drain you or fuel that will. The choice is always yours. He added 2 more ideas that sharpen this view: Amor Fati, the love of fate, and Eternal Recurrence, the ultimate test of whether you can affirm your life, including its suffering, without regret. These ideas are demanding, but they are also liberating. They invite you to stop fighting against what hurts you and to start transforming it. Nietzsche does not tell you to seek suffering for its own sake. He does not glorify meaningless pain. He shows you a harder truth. Suffering will come no matter what. The only question is whether you will waste it or use it. To see how this works, we need to take the first step. Insight 1. Suffering as fuel. The will to power. The will to power is one of Nietzsche's most misunderstood ideas. Many think it means the hunger to dominate others, to seize control, to rule. But that is not its core. For Nietzsche, the will to power is deeper. It is the primal drive of life itself, the urge to grow, to expand, to become more than you were. It is the inner engine that pushes a seed to break through the soil, that drives a man to stand again after being struck down. Now, here is where suffering enters. Pain is not a distraction from life. It is not a mistake in the system. It is the very pressure that awakens the will to power. Without resistance, there is no growth. Without weight, there is no strength. Without suffering, there is no transformation. Think of the body. A muscle grows only when it is torn and stressed. The stress is painful, but the recovery builds new fibers, stronger than before. The mind and spirit are no different. Every blow you take is a test. Every setback is a chance. Pain is the raw material. What you do with it decides the outcome. Nietzsche makes a distinction here. There is passive suffering and there is active suffering. Passive suffering is when you collapse, when you complain, when you let the weight bury you. Active suffering is when you take the weight on purpose, when you accept the struggle and use it to build yourself. One destroys, the other transforms. Imagine losing your job. You can sink into bitterness, or you can use the loss as a spark, forcing yourself to learn, to adapt, to create a new path that you would never have attempted otherwise. Imagine betrayal. You can drown in anger, or you can let the pain carve wisdom into you, teaching you what loyalty means, sharpening your judgment of people. This is the forge Nietzsche describes. Pain is the hammer. The blows are hard, they hurt, they shake you. But if you stand inside the fire and do not run, those same blows shape you into something harder, sharper, stronger. The point is simple, but brutal. Suffering will not automatically make you stronger. Some men are destroyed by it. They shrink, they become bitter, they lose themselves. But others use it. They step into the fire willingly. They let the pain teach them. And from that choice comes a strength that frightens the world. Pain is not the end. Pain is the beginning. It is fuel for the will to power. Now, embracing pain is not enough. Nietzsche goes further. He says you must learn not just to endure it, but to love it. That is the next step. Amor Fati, the love of fate. Enduring pain is one thing. Nietzsche asks for more. He asks you to embrace it, to affirm it, even to love it. This is the meaning of Amor Fati, the love of fate. Most of us resist our pain. We curse our bad luck. We tell ourselves that if only this or that had not happened, our lives would be better. Nietzsche rejects this way of thinking. He says, do not just accept the blows of life. Love them. Love them because they are necessary. Love them because they are part of your path. Love them because without them you would not become who you are. He writes, I want to learn more and more to see as beautiful what is necessary in things. This is the spirit of Amor Fati. When you look at your suffering not as an intruder but as a teacher, it loses its poison. What once felt like an enemy becomes a source of strength. But Nietzsche goes further still. He gives us a thought experiment. Eternal recurrence. Imagine that every detail of your life, every joy, every mistake, every heartbreak, every humiliation must be lived again and again in the exact same sequence for eternity. Imagine a demon whispering in your ear, this life, exactly as it is, will return forever. Would you curse the demon, or would you say, yes, I want this, I affirm it? This is not meant to be abstract philosophy. It is a test. If you recoil from your life, if you cannot affirm it, then you are living in denial. If you can look at even your darkest moments and still say yes, then you have discovered true power. Psychologists today call something similar radical acceptance, but Nietzsche sharpens it into something fiercer. It is not just acceptance, it is affirmation. To love your fate is to refuse the role of victim. It is to say, everything that happened to me is mine. I claim it, I want it, I will use it. You can practice this. Begin with small things. The traffic jam, the harsh word, the cold day. Instead of resisting, say to yourself, this too is part of my fate and I choose to love it. Over time, the practice extends. The failures, the heartbreaks, the pain you thought you could never bear. Each time you say yes, you take back power. Amor Fati and eternal recurrence are not easy. They demand courage. They demand a new perspective. But if you can embrace them, suffering no longer enslaves you. It becomes your ally. And when suffering becomes an ally, it can be turned into creation, into art, into literature, into works that carry your pain into the world and transform it into beauty. That is where we turn next. Van Gogh and Dostoevsky. When suffering is not only endured, not only affirmed, but transformed, it becomes something else. it becomes art, it becomes creation, it becomes a gift to the world. Nietzsche believed that the greatest works of the human spirit are born not from comfort, but from struggle. And in this truth, we find two powerful examples, Vincent van Gogh and Fyodor Dostoevsky. Van Gogh lived a short, tormented life. He was plagued by poverty, loneliness, and mental illness. He was often misunderstood, rejected, and left to wrestle with despair. Yet in the middle of this storm, he painted. He poured his anguish onto canvas. The colors of Starry Night are not just colors, they are cries. They are flames of longing. Each stroke of his brush was a way of taking the chaos inside him and turning it into form, into beauty. He never saw recognition in his lifetime. But today, his work touches millions. His suffering, transmuted, became a universal language. Dostoevsky's life carried a different kind of weight. Arrested for his political views, he stood before a firing squad and faced certain death. At the last moment, his sentence was commuted to years of hard labor in Siberia. He lived with epilepsy, with poverty, with the constant shadow of mortality. Yet from these depths came novels unlike any the world had ever seen. Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov. Works that stare directly into the abyss of guilt, redemption, faith, and despair. He did not hide his wounds. He wrote them. He offered them to his readers, and in doing so, he revealed the deepest corners of the human soul. What unites Van Gogh and Dostoevsky is not their style, but their courage. They refused to let suffering silence them. Instead, they turned it into a forge for creation. Their pain became pigment, their despair became prose, their torment became testimony. And through that alchemy, they transformed private agony into shared meaning. Nietzsche's insight comes alive in their stories. Suffering is not wasted if it is used. The world's greatest treasures are often born in fire. If Van Gogh had not endured his demons, we would not have the brilliance of his canvases. If Dostoevsky had not survived prison and illness, we would not have the depth of his novels. Their works remind us, suffering does not only break men, it can create legacies. But creation is not the only arena where suffering shapes greatness. It also forges leaders. Men who, because of what they have endured, can carry the weight of an entire nation. And no figure embodies this more than Abraham Lincoln. Not all suffering produces paintings or novels. Some suffering produces leaders. Leaders who can carry the weight of history because they have first carried the weight of their own despair. Among them, Abraham Lincoln stands as a towering example. Lincoln was no stranger to failure. Before he became president, he lost election after election. He faced financial ruin, political humiliation, and deep personal loss. He struggled with what was then called melancholy, what we would now call clinical depression. He buried his children. He lived with the shadow of grief carved into his face. For many men, this would have been enough to break them. For Lincoln, it became the ground on which his character was built. What did his suffering give him? First, compassion. Lincoln knew what it was to hurt, so he understood the pain of others. He read letters from condemned soldiers begging for mercy, and his instinct was often to grant it. He saw his enemies not only as rivals, but as men bound by the same human struggles he knew too well. Suffering gave him empathy, and empathy gave him strength. Second, suffering gave him patience. When the nation was tearing itself apart in civil war, Lincoln carried that weight without collapsing. He did not seek quick victories or shallow triumphs. He endured. He waited. He held the vision of a reunited nation even when blood covered the fields and despair filled the air. His endurance was not the endurance of a man untouched by pain. It was the endurance of a man who had already walked through his own darkness and refused to give in. Third, suffering gave him depth. Lincoln thought deeply. He wrote carefully. He was not flashy. He was not loud. His speeches, like the Gettysburg Address, were short but filled with gravity. They carried the weight of a man who had suffered, who had questioned, who had reflected long before he spoke. Nietzsche might not have thought of Lincoln when he wrote of suffering and strength, but Lincoln's life proves the point. Suffering can create leaders. Pain, when embraced, can shape the kind of character that holds steady when the world is falling apart. There is a story told of Lincoln reading a petition late at night, alone in his office, deciding whether to let a young soldier live or die. His advisors urged him to be strict. Lincoln, weary and grieving, chose mercy. He signed the pardon. This was not weakness. This was the strength of a man whose own wounds had taught him the value of life. Leadership born from suffering is not soft. It is not sentimental. It is forged in fire, and because of that, it endures. But Nietzsche's vision does not end with leaders or artists. It comes back to you, to the individual, to the man listening now. How do you take your own pain and use it? That is the next step, the practice of self-overcoming. We have seen what suffering can do in the lives of artists and leaders. But Nietzsche's challenge was never only about history's great figures. His challenge is aimed at you, at every man who carries his own wounds, at every man who wonders what to do with them. The answer is self-overcoming. Self-overcoming means to take what hurts you and use it to grow beyond yourself. It is the daily act of turning pain into strength. It is not about waiting for fate to hand you a crisis. It is about training yourself, practicing with small struggles, so that when the great storms come, you are ready. How do you begin? Start with rituals, small, deliberate practices that teach you to sit with discomfort and transform it. One ritual could be as simple as a cold shower. It shocks the body, it stings, but if you stay calm inside that pain, you teach yourself that you can endure. Another ritual is to face one hard task each week, a conversation you avoid, a project you fear, a truth you hesitate to speak. By leaning into these small struggles, you rehearse for the larger battles of life. Keep a journal. Write down what hurts. Write down what you learned from it. Put the lesson into words so it cannot slip away. Over time, this habit builds a record of your resilience. Create. Even if you are not an artist, you can take your pain and make something with it. Write a page, sketch an image, build with your hands. The act of creation is one of the oldest ways humans have ever turned suffering into strength. And reflect. Once a month, ask yourself Nietzsche's question of eternal recurrence. If you had to live this life with all its suffering over and over, would you still say yes? If the answer is no, then what must you change? If the answer is yes, then you have already begun to master Amor Fati. But a warning must be spoken. Nietzsche never glorified pain for its own sake. He did not tell you to seek it blindly, to romanticize it, or to drown in it. Suffering without meaning is only destruction. The goal is not to hurt yourself. The goal is to transform what already hurts you into power. The sign of progress is not how much pain you collect, but how much wisdom you carve from it. You know you are moving forward when you can face the same hardship with less fear, when you can endure without bitterness, when you can act with clarity even under strain. Practice makes suffering useful. It does not disappear, but it becomes your tool, not your master. And so the final question remains. What is the larger message Nietzsche leaves us? What is the conclusion we can draw from all these stories? That is where we turn now. We began with a question. Does suffering break men, or does it build them? Nietzsche's answer is clear. Suffering is neither curse nor accident. It is raw material. It is the hammer and the fire, and whether it destroys you or shapes you depends on your choice. Through the will to power, we saw how pain can act as fuel. Through Amor Fati, we saw how fate can be loved, not merely endured. Through Eternal Recurrence, we faced the hardest question. Can you affirm your life as it is, with every scar included? In Van Gogh, we saw pain turned into color. In Dostoevsky, we saw pain turned into words. In Lincoln, we saw pain turned into leadership. And through the practice of self-overcoming, we saw how you too can begin to forge strength from the suffering you already carry. The message is not easy. Nietzsche does not offer comfort. He does not promise happiness. What he offers is harder, but more valuable. He offers strength. The kind of strength that cannot be bought, cannot be faked, cannot be taken away. Strength that only suffering can forge. So what do you do now? Take 3 steps. First, identify one pain you are carrying right now. Do not hide from it. Write down what it has taught you, even if the lesson is still unclear. Second, choose one practice. It could be the cold shower, the hard conversation, the journal, the act of creation. Do it for 7 days. Do it with intention. Third, share one decision with others. Speak it aloud or write it down. Say, I have chosen to turn this pain into strength. These are small acts, but together they begin the work of self-overcoming. And then ask yourself Nietzsche's final question. If this life, exactly as it is, must return again and again, will you say yes? Will you affirm it? If you can, then you have discovered the hidden power of suffering. If you cannot, then you know where the work must begin. Pain will always exist. You cannot escape it, but you can choose what it does to you. It can make you bitter, or it can make you strong. It can leave you broken, or it can leave you forged. The choice is not whether you suffer. The choice is whether you rise from it. Nietzsche's challenge still stands. Embrace suffering. Do not waste it. Let it make you larger than you are. Pain can break you, or pain can build you. The decision belongs to you.